So today it is December 17, 2016, and I'm continuing this series on hybrid religion and how Paul, who was the only apostle to the Gentiles, I repeat, Paul was the only apostle to the Gentiles, condemned hybrid religion. And he did so. Once again, I'm going to go over this because it is very important to do so. First Corinthians 10:20, beginning in verse 14. Wherefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge you what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Messiah? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Messiah? For we being many are one bread and one body. For we all are partakers of that one bread, just like Israel after the flesh. Aren't they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? What say I then, that the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to Jehovah. And I would not that you should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of Jehovah and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of Jehovah's table and the table of devils. Do we provoke Jehovah to jealousy? Are we stronger than he is? Now, so I want to go to Colossians 2. And I will begin in verse 16. And I know I'm not going to make any friends among the Sabbath keepers or the Sunday keepers in this video, because both camps are going to be offended by this, but it's the truth, folks. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink, or in respect of the holy days, or of the new moons, or of the Sabbath days. Now, the holy days, he's talking about the holy days on the Hebrew calendar, and the new moons that the Jews kept, and the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, which are a shadow of things to come. So that means, here's what he is saying. Because you are under the wing or under the blood of the Messiah, you can no longer be judged in these following judgments, whatever you want to call it. Clean and unclean meats, or in drink. What? I have no idea. I don't even know what that means. Okay? Or in respect of any holy day. I know what that means. That means all the holy days that Israel was required to keep. And I'll explain part of that to you in just a minute. Or of the new moon, and a lot of people don't even understand that, but the Jews still have their new moon festivals. Or of the Sabbath day, that's the seventh day of the week. Now, in the Old Covenant, the Israelites were required to go to a place where Jehovah shall choose to keep the feasts, to keep the holy days. Well, once Jerusalem was destroyed, there was no place on the earth where Jehovah shall choose. Jerusalem was unchosen. Therefore, it was impossible to keep the feast as it is written in the Old Covenant. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. But what he is saying is these things are a shadow of things to come. That doesn't mean you can commit fornication. That doesn't mean you can replace the seventh-day Sabbath with another day. Because these are all shadows of things to come. These are things that you're still supposed to remember. But the body, the focus, the ultimate goal is Messiah. So he stands above the Sabbath. He stands above the eating of meats and drinks, and he stands above the holy days and the Sabbath because it is him. It is in him that these things are going to take place. The feast of the first fruits, that's Yeshua Messiah. The feast of ingathering, that's Messiah is going to send the two witnesses, and the angels to gather in Israel. All these things are going to be directed by Messiah at the behest of the Father himself. So all of these things that are written, don't add, don't take away. Meats and drinks, holy day, new moon, and the Sabbath day. Those things you can no longer be judged by if you, how do I put this? If you fail in the law to keep them. However, since they are shadows of things to come, you still should remember the holy days. You should still remember the Sabbath days, and you should still understand what the meaning of the clean and unclean animals are, even if you eat pepperoni on your pizza. The unclean animals represented the Gentiles. The clean represented Israel. Now, so then, does man have the right then to replace the seventh day Sabbath with the first day Sunday? No. There was nowhere given that right. Verse 17 proves it. Those things that you can no longer be judged on are a shadow of things to come. So they are a pattern, they're a template, which means you're not supposed to forget the template, because they represent something greater. So to go and replace the Sabbath with another day is replacement theology. And, of course, they replaced the Hebrew Messiah with a Greek or Roman Messiah. They replaced everything, all the templates, all the shadows, with falsehood. The shadows were not supposed to be taken away. The templates are not supposed to be taken away. These are things that we look at so we do not forget. You see, ancient Israel, because to keep them from forgetting, they had to literally act it out. But that did not, they still forgot the truth. So we don't have to act this out, but that does not give us license to forget the truth at all. We're still supposed to remember. That's what it means to have the law written in our hearts. If you're going to throw away all the templates, all the patterns, and replace it with falsehood, then that is a total and rejection and rebellion against our Father in heaven, and treading down the blood of Messiah as if it were a vile and unclean thing. Now, Constantine was the man. You can Google this. There's a lot of websites where you can find the truth about Constantine. As many of them, and in my previous video, I went over one of these websites. Let's see here. Sol Invictus, sun god. In Wikipedia, Sol Invictus means unconquered sun, was the official sun god of the later Roman Empire and a patron of soldiers. In 274 AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian made it an official cult alongside the traditional Roman cults, and etc., etc. Now, when you look at the, let me see here. All these, for example, sun worship was in ancient Egyptian sun worship, Sumerian, Babylonian sun worship, Mithraism was sun worship. Then we have Constantine and Sol Invictus. The struggle for deathlessness must be free. These are the words of Constantine, the first emperor, to legalize Christianity, and in his diction, it is a direct plea for human immorality that became the center point of which every church that Constantine elevated to unprecedented status in the late Roman Empire. He was born Flavius Valerius Constantius in 274 AD in the Roman province of what is called now Serbia. He died in Nicomedia in May 22nd, 337. In 312 CE, Constantine was preparing to battle Maxentius for control of the western portion of the Roman Empire. These are two different versions of the story regarding Constantine, or there are two different versions of the story regarding Constantine on the eve of the battle. One comes from Eusebius, his official biographer, who wrote, "Before Constantine went to battle, he considered what power to honor and rely on for protection. He contemplated whether to choose multiple deities or to fight in the name of a single God Almighty. In this account, the leader chose to pursue God and prayed for his assistance. In broad daylight, he claimed to witness a magnificent and radiant figure of a cross above the sun. Above the sign was the inscription, In hoc signo vinces. By this sign, conquer. The next morning he had an army paint their shields and carry this sign, which he had seen early into battle. He was confident that Christ would deliver him. This sign was made using the Greek letters chi and rho, which chi is an X, which is the mark of the beast, folks, and rho, which is P, as an abbreviation for Christos, meaning Christ. In 312, Constantine met his opponents in the Battle of Red Rocks, 9 miles north of Rome. Surrounded by large hills and Tiber River, Constantine's forces sent Maxentius and his army fleeing, and so on and so forth. And to this day, folks, here's another one. Constantine's law of uniting Christians and pagan in the observance of the venerable day of the sun. So he forced Christians to abandon this Jehovah's Sabbath and instead honor the venerable day of the sun, the first day of the week. It is to be noted that this official solar worship, sun worship, the final form of paganism in the empire, was not the traditional Roman Greek religion of Jupiter, Apollo, Venus, and other Olympian deities. It was a product of mingling Hellenistic Oriental elements, exemplifying in Aurelian's establishment of Eastern sun worship at Rome as the official religion of the empire, and his new temple enshrining Syrian statues of Baal and the sun. Thus, at last, Baal, the god of Babylon, came into the official imperial temple of Rome, the center of imperial religion. It was this late Roman Oriental worship of one supreme God, symbolized by the sun, and absorbing lesser divinities as subordinates or manifestations of universal deity, that competed with young Christianity. This was the Roman religion that went down in defeat, but infiltrated and colored the victorious church with its own elements, some of which can be seen to this day. This article is by Ralph Munday, and it is on www.themystica.com. So, now you see how the truth was trodden down and rejection of Jehovah and the persecution of the Jews and of the true believers began with Constantine, and the guy who called himself the Pope continued this persecution. Daniel 7 and verse 25. And I believe this began with the first quote Pope. Pope does this, that name does not belong to any man, especially not one who does not have a child. Daniel 7 and verse 25. Speaking of the little horn, and the Vatican is the smallest nation on the earth today. So it is no wonder that it's called the little horn. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, which they did, saints being the Jews. And in Revelation it makes a distinct difference between the saints and the followers of Yeshua. You do not get those two mixed up. And think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a times and a dividing of a time. And initially that started with Nero. That was your 3.5 years, but it was also 1,260 years from the time that the first man at the Vatican was appointed until Napoleon kicked him off his throne and put him in prison. And then the deadly wound was healed. The healing started beginning in 1922, and the healing was completely finished when Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini gave him his power back. So, here's what I'm getting at, folks. Knowing now that this man at the Vatican, who called himself a rightful heir to Constantine's throne, and who by the Crusades murdered millions, they say perhaps 50 million true believers in Yeshua, and murdered the saints who are the Jews, and they did this because these people were Sabbath keepers, and they rejected the Sabbath altogether and anything that had anything to do with it, and replaced it with sun god worship. Knowing this, if you be a follower of those people, aren't you partakers in their sin as well? Are you not guilty also of the murders that were committed by the sun god worshippers? Now, I'll let you be the judge of that. But remember this. On Judgment Day, when Jehovah comes to judge, he is going to judge in truth. So as for me, I stand with those innocent who were murdered for Yeshua's sake. I stand with the saints, the Jews, who kept the Sabbath. I stand with both of them. I do not stand with the Sunday keepers at all. Because my judgment is to myself, if I were to do so, I would be a partaker in their crimes, in their genocide, in their murders of men, women, and little children. And I have no part of that, ever. And I would ask everyone who is listening to do some self-examination, to be honest and truthful. Do you want to be a partaker of the sins of the sun worshippers?